Thank you for being here today. It always makes my heart swell with love and with excitement to stand in the back as people come in the door, and I get big hugs from everybody or funny looks from some of you, and it's okay. It's always a blessing to me. It's especially a blessing to me to be with you today after being in and out so much for the last month. I have one more Sunday, max. Next Sunday, can I have the day off for one more flu clinic? And so we have, as a group, given close to 6,000 flu vaccines in the last 6 weeks out in the community, and the majority of our folks are folks who otherwise wouldn't have access to get a flu shot. And so if any of you still need a flu vaccine, talk to me. And I will let you know where we're going to be in the next few weeks. All right, so the title of today's sermon is Seeing Christ in Everything. And the last sermon I preached is mostly about this experience that I've been having since I started this contemplative study through this book called The Universal Christ. This is a life-changing book. And it has a guidebook that goes with it that teaches you this contemplative practice where you just sit quietly and focus your thoughts on Christ, and don't try to pray and don't try to manipulate or change the situation, but just get yourself into a place where you can just be in the presence of Christ. And it is a life-changing book. I've learned some things from this book. The first thing I've learned is that Christ has always been. Always. We read in John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word, or the Logos, or the Christ. We also read that nothing was created without the Christ being there. We know that Christ is still present in all of creation. We read that in Colossians. We know that Jesus, in his time on this earth, was the human manifestation of God. I reviewed some notes this week from seminary, the ones I can still find at least. And I took some notes about the controversy that took place in the early stages of the church, where they couldn't decide what was Jesus Christ. Human? Was Jesus God? Was it a mixture of two natures? Was it God? Was it Jesus until he began his ministry? And then at his baptism when the dove came down? There's just all these arguments about who Jesus is. But the one thing I wrote down, and I wrote it in capital letters, and I underlined it and highlighted it, so it was very meaningful to me then, and it was very meaningful to me this morning when I read through it again. It's that Jesus the Christ is a single reality. Just one thing. We worship a Trinitarian God, a God that has three forms, but it's just one reality. And that's a mystery. And part of our faith is accepting that it's a mystery and that we may not always understand it all or be able to explain it all. And even sometimes when I say it out loud, I think, what? What is that all about? Also in my last sermon, I invited you into a spiritual crisis. Do you remember that? I invited you into a place where you are called to expand your belief and your faith and your love. And I read this quote to you from Oswald Chambers. The greatest spiritual crisis comes when a person has to move a little farther on in their faith than the beliefs that they have already accepted. And so those are the things that we talked about in our last sermon. But what I want to talk to you about today, I want to continue this idea of being able to see Christ in everything. In order to do that, you have to start with one very simple step. You have to start by seeing the Christ in yourself. And that's hard for us. The person you are the most judgmental of and the hardest on and the least forgiving to is the person that looks back at you in the mirror every day. And so in order to see the Christ in everything, you cannot exclude yourself. Jesus did not exclude himself. Jesus said to us, I and my Father are one. And so in order to truly see the Christ in everything, you have to look at the world through the eyes of Christ. Now that's a tough thing to do. That doesn't just happen instantly. We look at the world through our own eyes, through our own human eyes, and we see this world through the experiences that we've had. When I was in seminary, we called it the lens through which we look at things. And our lens is a human lens, and it is crowded, and it is covered up, and it is full of the sadnesses that we've experienced, and the traumas that we've experienced, and the pain and the hurt. Our lens is clouded with those things. And our lens is also clouded, though, with the great things that have happened in our lives. And we remember those things. But when we look at each other, including ourselves, we've got to learn to look at each other through the eyes of Christ. You have to ask Christ to let you see things through his eyes. It's a very simple ask, though. I practiced it this week. I just said the name Jesus. Now, I will tell you I was successful a little bit more this week than I have been the weeks before, because I practiced my contemplation. And because I said the name Jesus, when I began to feel those things, that hair standing up on the back of my neck, the things that I knew would irritate me and aggravate me, the things that happened to me this week that made me look at the world through my human eyes, I said the name Jesus. And I began to see the Christ in those things that normally would irritate me. Now, I was not 100% successful this week. I'm just going to tell you right now, I will never be 100% successful. So I'm going to let myself off the hook for that. Because one of the things you have to do to be able to see the Christ in everything is forgive yourself when you don't. And start over. Start again. I'm telling you, these last few weeks since I started this class have been life-changing. And it's life-changing for me because I can look at the world and see it differently now. Not all the time. I'm not perfect. But I am more tender and more gentle about the things around me because I try to see them through the eyes of Christ. And looking at the world and seeing Christ in everything, it'll change your life too. And if enough of us change our lives, and if enough of us experience this transformation, well, we can change the world. Now that's a big ask, right? But how about if we start just with this neighborhood? How about if you start in your own neighborhood or in your own circles? Now, I keep talking to you about these books, so I'm reading 2 books. I'm reading them simultaneously, along with 3 others that I haven't finished. One of them is The Universal Christ, written by Father Richard Rohr. He's a Franciscan monk. He is, I would call him a subject matter expert in contemplative worship. The other one is called A Bigger Table, and it's written by a man named John Pavlovitz, and he is a Christian writer and just an incredible human being. And he's writing a book called A Bigger Table. And it's building messy, authentic, and hopeful spiritual community. And I told you a few weeks ago, one of my goals in life, one of the things I want to do is build a bigger table. I told you, you can choose. You can build a wall or you can build a table. And I want to build a table, and I want to build a table where everyone is welcome. But I want to read to you right quick a couple of quotes from the Richard Rohr book. On page 51, Father Rohr says, "The proof that you are a Christian is that you can see Christ everywhere else." Wow. You can see Christ everywhere else. And if you can see Christ everywhere, you're able to live in love and not in fear. If you can see Christ everywhere, you're able to let people be who they're going to be. And you can meet them where they are instead of forcing them to come to you. If you see the Christ everywhere, you can suspend your own ego and your own judgments, and you can let those things go. And let me just tell you, that is an amazing feeling. I wish I was practicing it 24/7. I'm not. I'm not standing here today telling you that I'm an expert at this. But I am telling you that it is an amazing feeling to look at another human being and just say the word Jesus and be able to see the Christ in them. When you see Christ everywhere, you're doing what Jesus Christ did on this earth. And when we can begin to consistently love and to live the way that Christ lived, well, the world just becomes a better place. The other thing I want to read to you is from this book, from Richard Rohr. I marked it here so that I could find it easily, but I have no idea where it is. But here's what it says. Authentic God experience always expands your seeing and never restricts it. I'm going to move this down just a little bit. It's running into my double chin. How's that? Is that better? Then the P's aren't so hard, right? All right, so authentic God experience always makes your point of view bigger and never makes it smaller. Well, that'd be a great measuring stick, right? For us to judge our reaction to things. Because if you're looking at something and all of a sudden you become very narrow about what you're seeing, then you can ask yourself, is that a God experience that I'm having? Is that a God reaction that's going on with me? Oh, maybe not. Maybe not. If I look at someone and say, you know what, I don't really like what they're saying because it's not what I believe. That's not a God experience. In order to build a bigger table, you make room at the table for everyone. You make room at the table for everyone who wants to be in conversation with you and who wants to be in relationship with you. And that's not easy to do. But I want you to stop and think for a minute. Sitting right next to you is an incarnation of God. This building that surrounds us, this beautiful space where we come every week and we worship, this is a creation of God. This neighborhood we live in, or your neighborhood where you live, it's all an incarnation of the living God. And we have to begin to stop and to look at all of these things through the eyes of Christ. I want to read something to you from this book by John Pavlovitz, this book called A Bigger Table. Here's my note that says sermon right here, sermon, November 10th. But I want to read this to you just quickly. I don't know if we're really at all interested in proximity with those who differ from us. I'm not sure we care to follow Jesus all the way to the table with those we have contempt for from a distance. And yet this is the path of the disciple. In Matthew 5:9, Jesus says that those wishing to reflect the character of God must be makers of peace. At the center of this was the idea of creating shalom for others, enabling them to have the same access to wholeness, sustenance, justice, and joy as anyone else. It was not merely some internal understanding about the intrinsic value of all people that Jesus held in his heart, but it was the tangible, visible response in the world that affirmed that Jesus understood that it was time to stand in the gap for those people when their value was disregarded. And invariably, this making of peace will need to be extended to those whose religious beliefs, and listen to this next part, to those whose politics and behavior don't seem to be compatible with our own. We're going to be required to reach beyond our preferences and comfort. If we're going to build a bigger table, we're going to be required to reach beyond our preferences and comfort. No matter how inclusive or open we imagine our hearts to be, Jesus will always cause us to stretch farther than we are comfortable with, always seeking greater diversity, more justice, and deeper renovations. This means that we endure the tension of creating peace for another while experiencing discomfort ourselves. It also means that expanding the table isn't just about entitled conservatives needing to make room for marginalized communities or progressive Christians. And it's also not about those whose religious convictions are far left of center, finding a way to continually seek understanding of and to extend an invitation to those who may stand in complete opposition to them. The bigger table cannot be for ourselves and only those who are to the left or to the right of us. Redemptive community requires that we extend the invitation to both sides of our political and religious perspectives. Are you uncomfortable yet? We also have to endeavor to build relationship, or at the very least to build understanding. This is perhaps the greatest challenge Jesus provides us with. It is the counterintuitive compassion we are asked to cultivate. Powerful, powerful things. Now, building a bigger table, it's hard. I'm going to tell you right now, it's hard. I've got a friend in California. His name's Philip, and I love Philip. We've been friends for, 15 years probably. His mother was my neighbor when I lived in Arlington, and I helped take care of her when she went on hospice. And Philip and I became very close. Philip and I keep in touch now via Facebook, though. You know how I love Facebook. Philip has a different name for it, though. He chooses another part of the body in place of the word face. Now, I can't say that out loud here in church, but you can just imagine at the opposite end of face is the word that Philip uses for Facebook. So last night, after a long day and being a little bit tired, I opened up Facebook, as I often do, because I'm addicted to my screens. Yeah, and I read something that hurt my feelings. And I looked at something through my human eyes, and I viewed it through the lenses of the hurt and the crises and the traumas I've had in my life, and I took offense to it. And before I could even think about what I was doing, I responded in a negative and a hateful way. And so I'm telling you, this looking through the eyes of Christ at the world includes the things you read and the things you see. Because as soon as I had sent that response and the person who had posted that responded back to me and asked me why I had attacked her, my heart was broken. And I immediately repented and fell on my knees. And I asked her to forgive me, and I asked Christ to forgive me I'm preaching this stuff and I can't live it every moment. And so I'm telling you that it's hard. This morning I came to church, still wounded from the pain that I had caused myself, still asking God for forgiveness for the way I reacted last night. And I got irritated here with somebody. It's hard. It's hard. Because the things that we see, they stir up these feelings of fear in us. And we fear what we don't know if we look through our own eyes. And when we're looking through our own eyes, we're always afraid. I am so afraid that I'm going to do this wrong, that I'm going to make a mistake being a pastor, that I'm going to get up here and it's going to go out on the internet and everybody's going to see my mistake. And I'm so afraid when I make this bulletin that it's going to be wrong and that it's not going to be the same as Max does it and it doesn't look right and that you're not going to like it. And so I'm telling you, because this is hard. This is hard to look at everything through the eyes of Christ. But I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to let go of that fear. And if I mess this up, I mess it up. And if the bulletin doesn't work for you, it works for me. I'm going to say 3 words to you about why this bulletin on a half page is so meaningful to me. Requires no folding. In order, you're going to be okay, Max.
Praise the Lord.
Praise the Lord. In order to look through the eyes of Christ at everything, in order to see the Christ in everything, we're going to have to change. We're going to have to remember that seeing things through the eyes of Christ doesn't make things perfect, though. It's not a magical cure. We still are going to see things that stir up our past, that bring up those traumas and those wounds from the past. And we're still going to get angry and resentful. Because we're going to always remember that we've been hurt and we've been traumatized. And we use that sometimes. Let me stop saying we. I use that sometimes to justify being a jerk myself. It's okay for me to be short with you. It's okay for me to get irritated with you because you know what? Somebody hurt me when I was young, or somebody traumatized me when I was a teenager. I'm letting that go. I'm going to suspend that fear. I'm going to suspend that wall. I don't want to be a wall builder. I want to be a table builder. And so I'm going to let those things go. Because people are still going to disappoint you. And they're still going to make you angry. They're going to question you. They're going to challenge you. And if our first response is not, I see the Christ in you, then we are going to always just be angry and emotional. Now, I want you to stop right now. And I want you to think about someone in your life that's hard to love. Go ahead, I'll wait. Think about that person or that group of people. Now I want you to imagine Jesus looking at them. And I want you to look through the eyes of Christ at that person. And I want you to say the name Jesus so that you can begin to see them through the eyes of Jesus Christ. Our sacred text today comes from 2 Corinthians 3:18, and it says, "Our unveiled gaze receives and reflects the brightness of God until we are gradually turned into the image that we reflect." I'm inviting you to stop seeing the world through the veil of fear and trauma and pain. I'm inviting you to take off that veil so that you can see the Christ in everything. It's not easy. I'm not inviting you to something that's fun or easy to do. I'm inviting you into a spiritual crisis. I'm inviting you to a place where we're going to have to work hard to build a bigger table. I'm inviting you into a place where we invite folks into our fellowship who we would not normally have fellowship with. I'm telling you it's hard to build a bigger table, but I'm inviting you to join me in going out to places, seeking fellowship from people that we wouldn't normally seek fellowship from. I'm inviting you to be uncomfortable with me, because until we create the habit of looking at the world through the eyes of Christ, until we can look in every single eye and at every part of creation and say, "I see the Christ in you," it's going to be tough. It's going to be hard work. But man, it's going to be worth it. Pray with me, if you will, please. Open our eyes, Lord. We want to see Jesus. We want to look at the world through the eyes of Christ, knowing that this is what you've created us to do, knowing that our job here is to build a bigger table and to welcome people to that table and to share the blessings that we have and to live the life that Christ lived. Help us to remember, Lord, as we build our bigger table, that Jesus the Christ also fed Judas. Be with us now as we leave this place, and help us this week, this day, this next few minutes, to intentionally see the Christ in others. Amen.